welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And you are joining us from where today?
I am in Basque Country, and of course, that's not the name of the of the region. It's got another name which I cannot pronounce, but let's just call it Basque Country. So in the north of, way in the north of Spain right now.
All right, fantastic. All right, so today is episode 38, and we're calling it the Breakup Show. And I want to be specific about
why are we calling it that?
Well, it looks like some things have been going on in your life, Eugene, since we last did a podcast, which gave us some thought. So a lot of people leave jobs, right? They're laid off, they quit, they're just like, I can't anymore with this, and they depart. That's not what we're talking about, right? There are attendant challenges that come with leaving any job, especially if it's not volitional. But what we're talking about is the ending of an affiliation or a partnership that feels like a breakup. It's more analogous to a divorce than to, ending a short-term relationship. Those kinds of work relationships, often it's two founders who start something. It can be an artistic, creative enterprise, but it's that sense when something ends, it takes a piece of you that is different than just leaving a job. And as many of you who are listening know, Eugene was a founder / co-founder of a band called Oxbow many years ago. And there was a breakup. Do you want to give us a little bit of history of Oxbow for people who aren't familiar and tell us what's been happening?
Yeah, Oxbow started in, I always get it confused, 87 or 88. And I decided after making records for years with the hardcore group Whipping Boy that I wanted to do something really special, and that was Oxbow. I tried to record it myself, couldn't, and so I pulled in the guy who was playing guitar in Whipping Boy at the time, a guy named Nikon, and we created Oxbow. And lo and behold, it was popular. I mean, at this point now, we're from the vantage point of 36 years later, 8 critically acclaimed records. I mean, we don't sell a lot, but they are critically acclaimed. And we've toured from Japan to all over Europe. 4 documentaries made on us, a fifth Hollywood one, purportedly in the works. So we've had a pretty good run, and this was probably the apotheosis of it. We were on tour with Mike Patton's other band. Mike Patton is a singer for Faith No More, Grammy-winning Faith No More, and he's got another band called Mr. Bungle, who I believe might also be Grammy-winning, and they took us on tour with them. So we were playing every night to audiences of upwards 5,000 people easily. The schedule had us end the next to last show being a huge festival in France with Metallica, which promised, upward of 20,000 people. And you can imagine, the attendant merchandise sales, and this is all really good for business. Bands dream about this stuff. People would murder friends of theirs to get this delivered to you. So we're on the tour, about 6 shows from the end of the tour, and we get an email, which it still causes me palpitations. We get an email, the kind that let's just make this a professional setting. You get an email, and in the email subject heading is an allegation of a crime that's been committed. Now, to make the parallel complete, since all you've been doing is going to work and going home, in this instance, going to work, playing a show, going back to the hotel afterward, you're curious about what this allegation is. And at this point now, it's made the music press. The guitar player, Nico, has been accused of some, they're fairly serious allegations. Serious enough so that 6 shows from the end, everybody, and it was wonderful to see this actually take place, has to due diligence. They have to inquire, and they have to have a zero tolerance policy, and they have to act on this. So in lieu of somebody immediately saying, that never happened, here is my card from when I checked into the hotel at midnight, I don't know who you're thinking about, it's a case of mistaken identity, they have to cancel everything. So, or notify and give them the venues an option. So 5 venues or 6 venues were notified. 2 venues were like, yeah, it's okay, they can play, and four canceled, including the show with Metallica and 20,000 people. So now we have a workplace situation where you have a coworker who is apparently accused of being a bad actor in a work setting. What do you do when somebody comes and says so and so has done, very possibly committed a crime? Well, it's pretty clear to me that that person would probably be let go. What do you do if the person who's done it is an executive officer of the company? Well, given my background with this show, and if the shoes fit, and as an executive and management for where am I now, 61, almost 62, for a better part of 40 years, my attitude was we should get ahead of this. We should deal with it, be forthright, tell the truth, and explain what happened, and then we can start moving ahead. And after about 117 texts back and forth, it was finally successfully, a statement was developed after consulting with record labels and PR people and booking agents and lawyers. And a statement was released in the press yesterday. And so now in advance of it, not wanting to wait, did the best thing that I could, which was to kill the band, remove myself from the situation to show that I'm taking the allegations 100% seriously, and letting the chips fall where they may. So I released a Substack after waiting a week, waiting for some sort of action to address what I think is a serious allegation. Nothing happens. I release a Substack, and then a few days later, the accused releases a statement, makes the music press from Brazil to Japan. I was shocked that it actually, based on my Substack, reached as far as it did. And so now where we are is uh, I have resigned. The statement announces that the band is no more after 36 years. And there is an open endedness to it because we are now attempting to get to the bottom of it. I don't know that that will be possible, but I think that's the thing that should happen. So that's where we are presently.
So, presumably over 35, 36 years, there's been conflict before between band members over direction. I mean, you can't have had that long of an affiliation without conflict.
Any
What's
hum,
different about
any four humans together, you're going to have that, right?
exactly? So, what's different about this one?
A crime was alleged. It's one thing to say, I want red, or I want gray, or I don't like the use of the word. In the case of the first record we put out on Hydra Head, there was a word choice. People go, I think that's the word choice is a little too strong. So I swapped out pornographic for hypnographic. I mean, these were minor, though I think the worst problem we ever had was over the artwork for our third record, which was called Let Me Be a Woman. And that was only a problem because, interestingly enough, the same band member was 6,000 miles away and wasn't communicating very well, and we had obligations to meet in terms of record labels. So, but yeah, nothing has risen to the level of the police have been notified, and investigation is ensuing. Nothing has risen to that level before now.
How do you feel about it?
Keep in mind something that should be noted, because I know people's minds go to strange places when we talk about rock and roll, but we are all men in our 60s. So this is not Led Zeppelin, 28-year-old members of Led Zeppelin behaving badly. We routinely play, we go back to the hotel, and we go to sleep. The drummer, his wife was doing our merchandise. We are a family band at this point. So this was a shock. Now, these are allegations. I don't know what happened. I don't know if there's guilt or innocence. This is not the issue, but it's never the issue, even in a corporation. You don't know what happens when two people are alone. You don't whatever, but you do know that you have to address it and that you can't We're not the Catholic Church. We just can't take bad actors and keep moving them from town to town. So I think I did what should be done in this instance, and I'm interested to see what kind of resolution is reached. And I think largely that'll determine whether we ever release the record we just finished recording. So
I'll ask again, how do you feel about it?
I feel much better than now that the right thing is being done, right? Like prior to the statement that was released yesterday, I felt largely like we were all sitting around talking about the house being on fire, and nobody was making honest efforts to, or they were making honest efforts to deal with the fire, but they were doing it in a way that wasn't helpful and that wasn't stopping the fire and that wasn't mitigating the damage that might have occurred as a result of the fire. And that was my big concern. And also, from my point of view, I believe I had a certain amount of exposure that was not equally shared among the membership. Based on the front man in my mind, which is what I am, always bears a disproportionate share of attention. And in this instance, if the attention were negative, I was concerned about my life and the people who love and are connected to me. So I thought I did not appreciate the leisurely pace at which resolution was reached, which is why I went with the Substack first. And I've drawn a little bit of heat, both internally and externally. For one guy said, "Oh, you jumped the gun. This is not the dark ages. Cancel culture is dead, and you probably could have ridden this out." And I wanted to respond to the guy. Could have is very different from should have. Lots of things I could have done. Should I have? I believe, and I will believe so until my dying day, that I did the right thing.
So one of the things we wanted to do with this story about Oxbow is use it as a jumping off point to talk about what you mentioned, which is what happens. How do you navigate this in business, right? And there's basically three pieces which you've kind of already gone through, right? The first is making the decision to end that partnership, right? How do you do it? And then what do you do afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like for you, making that decision, not that it was easy, I'm sure, but it sounds like it was pretty straightforward. Like there was a line.
Keep in mind, I didn't kill the band. I just fired myself. The subsequent statement that was released by the accused ended the band, but did say that it didn't go with "we're on hiatus." Said the band has ceased to exist as of now. Future possibilities unknown. Something to that effect.
Right.
So you can go to Google and you can type it up, and the statement comes. So,
I mean, what I've seen, and I've seen a number of these dissolutions, right? People who have started a creative enterprise or a creative company, they were friends, they worked together, and then for various reasons they had to separate. And what I found as the consultant and coach is that the reasons for ending those kinds of business partnerships are as varied and as often challenging as they are in ending a marriage. Right. I mean, you never know kind of what goes on behind closed doors, but there's not a simple kind of set of circumstances, but usually it has to do with there's an ethical disconnect, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one partner thinks that something is okay, and the other partner draws that line and says, like, this is not acceptable to me. So often there's an ethical disconnect. The other thing that can happen is one partner wants to go in one direction, the other partner wants to go in another direction. It's just a difference of opinion, but it requires resources, time, maybe investments. There's just that sort of like disconnect. Unfortunately, sometimes health issues, mental health issues, even addiction or alcoholism can come into play. And that's a particularly challenging one because you can feel all sorts of sympathy and empathy for a partner. But if they are not taking care of themselves, if they are not taking care of their mental health needs or dealing with whatever addiction issues, a lot of people have to just say, like, I can't support someone who is not taking care of their own situation. And then sometimes
You,
just what?
if they were driving a bus or flying a plane, you would not want to be on that bus or that plane.
Right.
And this really interesting parallels to something that we've talked about before on the show, which is the winding down of the Ozzy trial, where you have the CEO Carlos Watson, who we both know, and his COO Samir Rao. Samir pled guilty to charges of financial fraud, and he made a plea deal. And so now the CEO and the COO, good friends, are now sitting across the docket from each other in court. And according to Reuters, the defense summation for Carlos's trial, which ended today, was that Samir did it all. So this is, as a child of a bad divorce, as a child of two bad divorces, I remember resolving with my ex-wife that who also was a child of bad divorces, that we were not going to do bad divorce, and we're going to have a very convivial divorce, and we are friends to this day. But these things with Oxbow and then the thing with Ozzy, what seems to be functionally different is that a third party has been invited in, and that is the law. Right? So it gets order of magnitude more serious, I think. So
Well, one of the things, and that brings us to kind of like how to leave, right? And like sometimes people don't leave because there's like, I'm sure most of you have heard this, but something they talk about in kind of addiction circles is this idea of like, if you put a frog in boiling hot water, the frog would jump out, right? But if you put a frog in cold water and slowly heat it up, the frog might not understand what's happening. And a lot of times for people who are involved in a dysfunctional situation, whether it's because of alcoholism, mental health, or just dysfunction, we get used to the temperature and it keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up. Like I'm sure if you had said to Samir a year in, hey, so I'm looking in a crystal ball and you're going to be, and then listed out some of the things, he would have been like, I would never do that. I would never do that. Right. And so I think part of the challenge too is that there can be this kind of slow erosion of, one partner's values or an understanding. You get used to crazy. A lot of times people can be isolated. So there isn't somebody outside, a friend or whatever, saying, what are you doing? Why are you still, those kinds of dynamics. But when you leave a partnership, and I do think you did a really good job, Eugene, of like, you took the high road, right? Like your Substack was taking care of your own choices, talking about what you were doing. There wasn't, blame. You were talking about the positive things, but you weren't pretending, and you were clear about what you did. Right. And everyone else can be clear about what they did insofar as they want to do that. But certainly taking the high road, I think, is important. The challenge is, like in a lot of divorces, people will fight over stuff that isn't the thing they're actually fighting over. And hopefully, if you are in a business partnership, I hope that you have a really good partnership agreement that talks about the dissolution of the partnership, right? Because you need to have that. Some people don't like getting a prenup because they think that it's not romantic, but in a business situation, you need the business equivalent of a prenup. Because what will happen is a lot of times that energy, the frustration, the high feelings will translate into messaging, right? So it sounds like you and the other people in Oxbow were intentional about your messaging. And you agreed, you got lawyers involved. All of those things are really important because if you don't agree on messaging, even if it is the patently false, he is going to spend more time with his family, you don't want to leave that up to somebody to decide in the moment, right? And you also want to look at, there's something called a non-disparagement clause, which is hard to enforce, but it is a useful, it's a useful dam against the floodwaters of frustration that can sometimes happen, which basically means you have a legal document that says you can't talk shit about me in period, not just in public. You can't, you can't say things about me. And so really,
when leaving Ozzy, they tried to get me to sign one of those, and I refused.
Yeah. Yeah. And usually a non-disparagement goes with a non-disclosure. But the idea is if you're choosing to leave a partnership, absolutely, people are going to be curious, but you don't have to tell them every single detail. What you do need to do, however, is you do need to be clear with the people who are involved what the change is, right? So I was once hired to take over for when a partnership had broken up. And I came in as, my first day as the new, kind of partner fill-in person, although I wasn't a partner.
Mm.
And the guy who was leaving, the people didn't know. I walked in and they're like, wait, where's so-and-so?
Oh no.
There had been no communication whatsoever.
Right.
Right. So there
Right.
needs to be a communication of this partnership has ended
Mm.
and here's what we're going to do now. Nobody needs to
Mm.
know why, nobody needs to whatever, but it's like, here's what we're doing going forward, which is what you did with Oxbow, right? Like you are leaving. And then, Nico's statement, the band is not as it was, it no longer exists. People may want to know more, but that's the clarity that they needed.
Right. Yeah, and then there initially between my statement and Nico's statement, there was a little daylight. So there were people who clearly knew what had happened, people in France who clearly knew what happened, who were peppering this stuff, peppering the statement in social media with kind of, why don't you tell us what really happened? So this was, yeah, at this point, I was like, I've told you what I know. And I think that was maybe causally connected to them releasing it when they did. But the interesting thing is that I and this is a brand new world, and social media has made it so. You've had people who have been fired from jobs, people have quit jobs, or bad actors at jobs, and they have gone to social media, and next thing you know, something's gone viral. So companies have to be very ginger about this stuff. You have to very gingerly. You have to go about doing this stuff because you don't know who's going to do what and what's going to go viral and what's going to be said. You have to control the narrative. You have to. And honesty in that instance is the best policy. It's like, this is all I know. If you know anything else, my ears are open, but this is all I know. And I think because you don't want, it's like a game of telegram or telephone that people used to play. All it takes is 3 or 4 iterations through social media before next thing you know, you've murdered somebody when that's not at all what happened, right? So
And one thing that was a challenge that you've mentioned is the pause is deadly here. And
yes.
like that's too long. That from shows being canceled at very high profile events to yesterday or the day before the statement coming out. That's what is that, 2 weeks? I mean, it's whatever length of period it is, too long, right? And you talked about some of the reasons why. Lawyers get involved, lawyers review things, in business. Hopefully there's a crisis communications plan or person. Different stakeholders need to have their ideas and opinions, and different people want to do different things. It's easy to see how days and even weeks can pass, but that is not, like, swift is better.
But also, and I'm sure you know this. What is it they once said that Christopher Browning said about Germany in the 40s? He said, if you do the unbelievable, people tend not to believe it. And I think there was an incipient feeling that maybe this will just go away. And I was adamant. We had a quorum of people within the group who were adamant that this is not going to go away. It's not going to. It's like having somebody lurking outside your house with a knife. You might be able to get to your car in time, but they're going to get you sooner or later. So you need to address sooner and quickly. And you know, with people resisting, I mean, we're dealing with a lot of issues. We're dealing with people who have perception issues about themselves, who have had a whole life of understanding themselves as a good guy, who suddenly find themselves not being the good guy. And it's an allegation. I don't know what happened. I don't know whether it happened or not, but suddenly the view is totally different, and that's uncomfortable for people. But I think I said very directly, you're going to have to take lumps on this one, get used to it. And I think that's you throw yourself on the mercy of the court. That's what that's about. So
Right. And the last part is, if you are in this situation, don't underestimate how challenging it can be.
yeah,
I mean, there's, I think we have a cultural understanding that a divorce, particularly a long-term marriage, 36 years is a long time to be in partnership with somebody or a group of people. Don't underestimate how difficult it could be, because I've seen people try to dismiss it like, well, we founded a company and it didn't work, or I've gone on to do other things, or I just want to put it behind me, which is valid. But at some point, you need to give your spouse self space to grieve it, because, it's not just about the employment or the job or the career. Our identities become invested in
Yeah.
these kinds of partnerships, right? Particularly if you're talking about founding a company, being an entrepreneur, founding an artistic group, organization, whatever it may be. These kinds of partnerships give us identity. They give us connection. They give us community. I have seen, like I said, a number of these. In every case, the two people were friends when they started whatever the enterprise was, and they were never friends again.
Well, I've guarded against anticipating that. I've guarded against that many years ago. The idea that young guys have when they start a band, that we're going to be like the Little Rascals, or we're going to live in the honeycomb hideout. We're going to do everything together and go over. I got rid of that. Going from Whipping Boy to Oxbow, I got rid of that. We're business associates. I've all over the years have always talked about it in terms of a business enterprise. And indeed, as it was unwinding, I said, look, if we were in the workplace, I always made that parallel. So it's, um, we're not going over to each other's houses for dinner. We're not going to the movies together, not going to parties together. If we're not playing a show, maybe we go to shows together. Like I've maybe gone to a show with Nico twice to see other Peter Murphy or something. I mean, so I guarded against that because I knew it would make things difficult in the long term, right?
Right.
Uh, and also, it fits my personality. Whipping Boy was started with me and Steve Ballinger, and Steve and I were very good friends before we started the band. But this was very different. So my earnest hope, my earnest hope is that the victim in this instance says, "Oh my God, this is my dream world scenario. Oh my God, I completely confused this person with that person. I'm terribly sorry." Then the record comes out, a big reunion tour, and no harm, no foul. That's the dream scenario. What's more than likely, because you can't talk to the victim in this instance, right? You just can't get on the phone and call the victim. They won't. They are protecting the victim's identity, um,
As they
it,
should.
it- as they should.
Mm.
It's just that there will be no resolution, and I think that's more than likely. But that's a terrible way to end it. That means that we just released it. We don't even go to the record label with the record, just release it on Bandcamp, and it ends with a whimper and not with a bang. So don't know. The future is unwritten in this instance, and with corporations, they have assets, so it's a big concern. Oxbow has no assets. We got a ton of debt, so
Right.
there's nothing that has to be unraveled. So in a very weird way, we need not ever talk to each other again. So it's even worse than like a breakup where hey, my shirt's at your house. Could you give me my shirt? Or could you? So it kind of winds down slowly. I mean, it's, but the interesting thing is the identity issue that you talk about. The first time that hit me in a major and significant way was when I seriously got injured weightlifting and couldn't lift weights anymore. And I'd been lifting weights since I was 9 years old. So to have this happen when I was 19 and adjusting to not being a big muscle guy was terrible and difficult and depressing. And I vowed at the point when I took 2 years off and then slowly started working out again. I vowed that I would never, ever do that again. That I would never put so many eggs in one basket that if that basket is taken away, I didn't know who I was.
Mhm.
Uh, so,
Well, and
and funny, in fact, when I read the court transcripts from Carlos Watson and Samir thing, I'm watching him do a version of that when he says, in response to prosecutorial questioning, he says, I was a CEO of. He stops because I am this. It's like, yeah, man, the party's over. The
right.
sooner you is that, the better off you're going to be. But okay,
Right. Well, and to just end on a positive note too, I will
yeah,
say that I have seen, and I'm thinking of two companies in particular that were started by friends
hmm
that are incredibly successful. I
hmm
mean, they do great work together. they have really skillful, strong relationships. And so I don't want people to feel like there can't be effective partnerships, right? And these are long-term businesses that do great work and just are so positive. And so I do think that it is possible to have partnerships that can thrive. It is possible to go through some difficult challenges and lean on shared values, work through things just like you can in other kinds of relationships. And I do think that there is, because, when you were talking about not being as friendly with people in Oxbow, I've done that too at work, right? That's kind of my inclination. But I also feel like I've sort of missed some things too. And so, if you're younger, if you are thinking about founding something, be careful, set it up carefully, make sure you have good prenups and legal agreements about the partnership. But, it also can work. And I think when it does happen, it can be really life-giving. So to those of you that are thinking about it, do your due diligence, but, have some hope.
Also, I've been exposed to people who are in much, much more significantly successful bands, and it's been interesting for me to watch how they deal with their problems, which they take 100% seriously. I know a guy whose job it is. He is a touring sponsor, and you know what I mean when I say sponsor,
like somebody who helps other people stay sober.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Hired specifically to go on the road to keep the star of the show away from temptation. Can't have the other bands can't have alcohol in the dressing room. It can't be visible in the dressing room. If you have it and are drinking it, you have to drink it in a hidden and the sponsor is just there hanging out. She going to shows, watching them load in, watching them rehearse, and is there from beginning to end. And you have to be a larger band to be able to afford that. But I think that is what you do. That when you have a successful business, what you do is take care of the business.
Right.
And if we are able to get beyond this terrible situation, I would say that is a way to take. That is what you do to guard the safety of your business.
Well, and to invest in the relationship. Right.
Correct.
And obviously I am an executive coach, I coach partners, but also the idea of like, even without an executive coach, to check in regularly, right? Like I tell my clients, I'm like, set up a regular check-in at least twice a month and ask yourself, like, talk about these three things. What went well? Mm-hmm. What was challenging and why? And what would I like you to do differently next time?
Yep.
Right? It'll feel really awkward. But you need to practice those skills, particularly like this is challenging, particularly for somebody who isn't, as I am, so comfortable with conflict, who maybe is a little bit more conflict avoidant. You need to build those muscles so that you can talk about challenges before they become forest fires. And you can figure out what sort of outside resources you need, like someone to help with sobriety, or maybe it's somebody to help with conflict or somebody to help with finances or whatever. So, all right. That's go ahead.
Also, you do realize that, I've heard you say this before, and I know this is well familiar to you. You can't help somebody who doesn't think they have a problem.
Right.
Yeah. So there is that. But I'm a hopeless optimist. And I think that, like I said in the Substack, I hope that people get the help that they need and that good things can happen in the future. So,
okay. All right. Well, thank you for talking about all that a little bit closer to home than the things we normally discuss. If you have an idea for a show topic, please send it to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com, WTF@badbossbrief.com. I read every email and respond to most of them. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram, Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.